we're trying to just make a muck paste. Traditionally, you're going to use it's called kato, which is like collected from rice paddies that have been burned as part of their agricultural process. So they collect this kind of like ashy sludge that's a muck in Japan, and use it for this type of like wall building or kind of vertical, walls and like slab planting, things of that nature. And it's really good for making like muck balls or moss balls. So this is it's kind of like a consistency of like peanut butter. So we're trying to duplicate something along those lines. What I'm doing is I'm kind of grinding up some akadama. It's just so basically either akadama dust that I've sifted out, or crushing just some small, really fine akadama pebbles into that dust. So we want a really fine, we're trying to make mud essentially. And then I'm getting some potting soil, but sifting out all the big stuff and just sifting the fines out and using those. And then we'll use moss, some sphagnum moss, and we'll shred that into really fine particles as well. And that will be the main kind of like binder, and then we'll add a little bit of water and start to mix it together until we get the right kind of paste consistency that we're looking for. Well, like I said, I'm trying to get more. So the thing with kato is it's sticky. There's like a sticky quality to it. This isn't quite sticky, so maybe I need to add a little bit more water. So we're going for like a sludge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to just kind of just smear it like a thin layer. I don't want it to be really thick, because it'll kind of ruin the effect. Like, we're just trying to get a really thin layer of moss to grow. I don't want it to be too thick. Just almost like a single layer. And the stickiness is more if you're trying to do something on like an angled surface. If it's flat, it's even easier to get it to grow. We've already, like I said, got moss starting to creep over onto the pot itself, which is kind of what gave me the idea to continue that. So the tree was already doing it on its own. Time to do this, right? I mean, probably the best time would have been to do it maybe in the fall, like November, but it's still cool enough and wet enough that the moss is gonna be able to take hold. It would be a lot harder to try to do this in the middle of summer. So if you're trying to do a moss planting or establish moss, this is a really good time of the year to do it. Plus, we want to be watering it so much that just to keep it hydrated, it's still wet, enough outside that the moss will be able to germinate without us having to like constantly water it, which would then wash away the muck and the moss spores. So the goal is to have this, fully germinated and green by May. We may have to supplement a little bit with some natural moss. If there's any parts that don't quite take, but this would be the first step in actually trying to establish growing moss on a hard surface like a pot or a pathway or whatever you're trying to get moss to grow on. The reason the sphagnum moss is in the muck is as a binder. And we sifted it down, so it was really fine, but it is acting as some degree as a binder. It's what's kind of holding the dust and the really fine dirt together, and then it's also holding moisture. So flatten this out a little bit more. We don't want
too thick. A little bit of, and then now we can kind of just play, around with it. We don't want to have quite a, perfectly even edge. We want it to kind of feel like a little bit like the moss is naturally kind of growing. Give a little bit of undulation to the edge, and ideally, hypothetically, this could naturally just grow and cover the whole thing, which I originally had thought about, kind of just doing it as a geometric shape, and maybe that will be the eventual endpoint, but we'll at least start here and kind of see how it looks once we've gotten the moss on. So the next step is going to be to sprinkle the actual moss spores. Yeah. So this is what we use for our top dressing, which is a blend of the sphagnum moss, which has been dyed gray with sumi ink, so it's not that bright white. That's just purely aesthetic. And then it's mixed in equal ratio to green collected moss, which we then have shredded and sifted as well. So essentially, they're just moss spores mixed in with this sphagnum moss that will again help to help the green moss spores germinate and then spread. So it's going to actually, the green moss is going to grow on the sphagnum moss. The sphagnum moss is not going to grow. It's simply the medium, or the media for the green moss. So essentially, we'll just treat it as the same for how we would top dress, but I'm going to kind of like pat it against it. Since it is wet, I can kind of like spread it out, and then again just kind of lightly pat that green moss on that wet muck, and it should stick to it naturally. I might go grab a spray bottle just to wet the moss to help it really kind of bind a little bit more completely. But essentially, this is all we're going to do is just lightly apply the moss mixture to the muck. Say that 3 times fast.
Are you gonna continue and?
Yeah, we'll probably just continue to fill all the spots. The reason this stays kind of wet, so we've got a lot of liverwort and kind of non-desirous plants that are usually found in highly wet soils. So we pulled all those out. But yeah, we'll have to reapply that there. And you'll get a quicker kind of, the moss will start growing sooner if you start with fresh moss. It's easier to work with dried moss, meaning the green moss. So, during the repotting season, which we're headed into, we will take off all the moss that is growing on a bonsai. We'll repot it and save that, and then recycle that, reprocess that by grading it and then reincorporating it into our mosses here, our moss top dressing. And so if we use the green stuff, it's a little harder to sift and grate because it's still wet, but it's a quicker in terms of getting itself reestablished. So if you had collected moss and it's dried out, it's much easier to grate and sift and keep work with in that capacity, but it's going to take you longer for that to actually hydrate and start to grow again. So if you're looking to do it quicker, using fresh moss is the best. This is not fresh, so it's still green, but not that fresh. Just kind of pat it down a little bit. Okay, and we'll get a little so the goal then we'll want to make sure that this moss is staying hydrated, that it's not drying out. But like I said, this time of year is pretty good time to make that happen. But here in Puget Sound area. The fact that it's still cool, still cloudy, still damp, it'll definitely increase that possibility here. Get your back side there. I'm gonna grab just a rag to clean off back to the
Plating.
culinary plating. Yeah, we're gonna just kind of clean our edges here. And you know, we might lose a little bit as some of the edges maybe get dry or don't fully adhere, which is fine. You know, we're trying to grow something, not necessarily have it be. You know, it's probably not going to work out exactly, but that's kind of the fun too. So, but I'm pretty confident we'll get at least some of it taking, not all of it. By early May, we should have quite a bit more. You know, it's more or less 3 months from now. We should be pretty good. Again, if you're trying to do it in the summertime, it'd be much harder, or even a little bit later in the spring. So anywhere from 3 to 6 months is kind of the germination time, depending on your environment and when you are doing this, what time of the year you're doing it. But you can do this any time of the year. It's just, you know, you're gonna make it easier on yourself. And so yeah, just kind of stepping back and looking at it, you know, getting a sense of how it looks. You know, maybe it would look cooler to have the whole top of it green. Maybe not. It's one of those things that you kind of have to just see how it turns out. But we can always add more, or we can always take more off. But yeah, I like it. I'm liking the right side there. Maybe the left could use a little bit more variation in the edge. It feels a little bit just, you know, blocky or heavy on that side. So we can come in and just do a little bit of pushing that in a little bit, and then creating some variation in that edge, just to not have it be so boring of it. It's really, you know, it's really easy to work with this because it is just more or less like a paste, so you can kind of move it around like Play-Doh. You just kind of keep playing around with it until you get it where you like it.